Hi everybody, I hope you and yours are well. This week's Torah portion is Parshat Emor in Chumash Vayirka, the book of Leviticus. And I'd like to ask you a question that maybe you may not have thought about. Why is it that man is the only, quote, animal that when man travels, he stands erect? There are other species of animals like the kangaroo and the gorillas that can stand up, but when they travel on all fours. And we'll get to the answer to this question in a moment. But first, it's interesting. In last week's parsha, in last week's portion of Kedoshim, we learned about the commandment that we should be holy. In this week's portion, the Torah teaches us about the importance of not desecrating God's name. And just the opposite, making a kiddush Hashem, sanctifying God's name. And we do that by being honest and polite and gracious and a role model and an example of what a person will say. That's how a Jewish person acts in a very positive way. That's one aspect of making a kiddush Hashem, sanctifying God's name. The question is, what kind of commandment is it? It's not so easy. You know, we have character flaws and bad habits that we've developed, and ego and personal needs. And the answer is found in this week's Pirkei Avos. It's customary after Passover to study a chapter every week of ethics of our fathers, known as Pirkei Avos. It's a beautiful, beautiful lesson. There are many wonderful books on it. I highly recommend it. Pirkei Avos, Ethics of Our Fathers. And in this week's, the third chapter, it tells us that how special man is, that he's created in the image of God. We are created in the image of God. We have to understand what that means. But before we do any explanation, we need to understand that should give us a tremendous sense of confidence. We're not just another mammal walking around. We're created in God's image. Every human being is created in God's image. And God informed us of that. And we need to be very grateful for that. We are different than the animal species. How are we different? Well, it can't mean that we look like God. I'm bald. God isn't bald. But the commentaries explain the idea of the power of free choice. The idea that we can choose to make moral choices and overcome our ego and overcome our bad habits and do the right thing. And that's how we are created in God's image. And that's a very powerful tool that we can use to be holy and to sanctify God's name, because we have free choice. And that idea of being created in God's image helps us, yes, and give us confidence in who we are as a creation, and more than that, to figure out what we're doing. Because it's not coincidental that our brain is above our heart. The heart is our seat of emotion and seat of our desires, but the brain has the ability to control the heart. It takes work, and we're not always successful. But that's why man stands erect when he travels, because he needs to remember that we need to create that bridge from brain to heart and allow the brain and the soul to be in control of what the heart wants, and not allow the animals. They work on instinct. The heart and the brain, they're on the same level because they want what they want when they want it. But human beings have the capacity to overcome the heart and the ego and the thought process of me first, and say, what's the moral choice I should make? What is the right thing to do? I'd like to share a personal story with my father of blessed memory. He had been a Holocaust survivor, and during the Holocaust he came to a concentration camp. And there was a Jewish man in charge of giving out the, quote, uniforms that they had. And he was quite gruff, and they didn't size you. They gave you shoes, put it on, a shirt, pants, and they didn't measure you, and there was no fitting room. You got what you got. And he was screaming, hurry up, take this, whatever you get. Some was rubbed out, some was not rubbed out. And he went over to the man and he recognized him. He said, you know, you're screaming and giving people their things. You're losing your Tzelem Elokim. You're losing your image of God. You're forgetting about that. The man got angry at my father. He says, don't tell me about image of God. I just put my parents in the crematorium yesterday. But my father said, still. And what ended up happening was that my father stood on the side, and when the Germans weren't looking, he told the man, that person's a prominent rabbi. Give him something comfortable. Give him something that fits him. Give him something that's not rubbed out. And the man warmed to the idea, and he started helping people because he got reconnected to the image of God that was part of him. So the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos is teaching us an important lesson. We are created in the image of God. And that's why the Torah can command us in last week's portion in Kedoshim to be holy, and in this week's portion to sanctify God's name. We have that inherent ability because we are not just mammals that happen to walk upright. We are humans with a soul, which is part of God in us and gives us the power to have free choice, to allow our higher self, our spirit, to control our lower self. And hopefully may we be successful in portraying and emanating the image of God in all our interactions with people, in our interactions in business, in our interactions with our family, and let us choose correctly so that, in fact, God's name can be sanctified through all of our actions. Have a wonderful Shabbos. Again, always open to hearing comments and thoughts and questions. Let us know what you think. Have a great Shabbos.